You ever have one of those weeks where you go from cradling a newborn to basically taking down a neighborhood dictator? Yeah, me neither. At least not until the Maple Glen HOA decided to come gunning for my 6-day-old daughter, and my sleep-deprived brain did something I never thought I'd do. If someone told me last year that a baby's birth certificate would spark the downfall of the scariest HOA president in town, I'd have laughed. But that's exactly how it went. And if you've ever tangled with HOA nonsense, you'll probably feel a little vindicated by the end of this story, or at least get a kick out of what one stubborn mom can pull off when she's had enough. It all started on a Tuesday morning, so quiet you could practically hear Harper's tiny breaths echoing off the living room walls, sunlight coming in through the curtains. My husband Jake moving slow in the kitchen, juggling coffee mugs and what little sanity we had left. Harper had only been home a week, and honestly, I still hadn't figured out if it was day or night. So when the doorbell rang 2 sharp, aggressive rings that made my heart thud, I just froze, and Jake looked at me like, seriously already? He shuffled to the door barefoot, Harper in his arms. That's when we met Deborah Krantz, president of the Maple Glen HOA, standing out there like she was on an official police raid, clipboard held out like a weapon. "Morning, I need to see proof of residency for the new occupant." She snapped, eyes fixed on Harper like my baby was a criminal mastermind. I thought maybe I'd heard her wrong, Jake too, so he just stammered, "You mean our baby Deborah never blinked? Every resident of Maple Glen must be accounted for. That includes newborns. I'll need her birth certificate, immunization records, and an occupancy form by Friday, or we'll have to issue a formal violation." I could barely process what I was hearing, 6 days postpartum, still in my bathrobe, hair like a tornado hit it, so I just blurted out, "You're not serious?" Deborah gave this little smile, the kind that says she absolutely is. "Rules are rules, Mrs. Harland. If you're harboring an unauthorized occupant, the HOA has every right to initiate compliance proceedings." I wish I could say I fought back then and there, but honestly, I just stood there trying to remember how to breathe. Jake finally shut the door. Harper whimpered, and for a second it felt like the walls were closing in. I mean, who fines a newborn for existing? But with Deborah, that's how it worked. She'd been running the HOA for almost 10 years, memorized every bylaw, and lorded over the neighborhood like it was her personal kingdom. No one ever stood up to her, not really, and when she turned her sights on us, it got weird fast. By the next morning, a notice was taped to our door in crooked blue tape: violation, unregistered occupant. $75 pending fine. No signature, just the cold, official HOA stamp. I laughed at first, but then another showed up, this one for excessive noise during quiet hours. Harper's crying apparently was now a neighborhood threat. The neighbors, of course, all acted like they hadn't seen anything, blinds drawn, whispers by the mailbox, nobody saying a word out loud. I'm telling you, Deborah had them spooked. But me? Something just snapped. Maybe it was the hormones, maybe the exhaustion, but suddenly I couldn't let it go. It was the mailbox incident that broke me. Jake got home from the store to find our entire mailbox compartment sealed with a bright red tag. Address inconsistencies, the HOA board said when he called, but he'd seen Deborah's SUV parked nearby all morning. Jake tried to reason with her, holding Harper's blanket in one hand and a violation notice in the other. She's 6 days old, Deborah, not a squatter. Deborah didn't even blink. She is unauthorized until documentation is filed. That's the procedure. I swear the way she said it, like she was quoting the Bible, it wasn't just mean, it was cold-blooded. That's when I decided to stop feeling sorry for myself and actually do something. Let me back up a sec. Before I had Harper, I worked in a hospital transcribing case notes, line by line, word by word. You get pretty good at picking up on little details. And something about Deborah's address never quite sat right with me. She always showed up for HOA business, but never ever went into the house she supposedly lived in. So while Harper slept on my chest and the house hummed with white noise, I started digging zoning maps, tax records, HOA charters, all of it. I wasn't just guessing, I was hunting. By Friday, I was standing in the city clerk's office with a folder full of printouts. "Hi," I said, sliding a note across the counter. "Can you confirm who owns 1207 Red Pine Drive?" The clerk squinted at her computer, then gave me a look. "That one's owned by Horizon Realty. Been a rental for years. No, Deborah isn't on the lease, and she's not registered to vote here either." Actually, her real address is in Oakwood Heights. Different town, different county. You know what I mean? Deborah didn't even live in the neighborhood she was running. I walked out of that office practically shaking with adrenaline. Then at home, I filed 3 complaints. One with the City Planning Commission, one with the State Consumer Protection Agency, and just for good measure, one with the HOA Oversight Division. Timestamps, screenshots, every violation notice Deborah ever left us. And because I was feeling just a tiny bit petty, I fired off a quick message to the local news HOA president, illegally harassing new parents while living in another town. Didn't expect much to come from that, but it felt good to hit send. Now here's where the story picks up speed. 2 weeks go by, then another knock on the door, but this time, it's not Deborah standing there looking smug. It's a city compliance officer, all business, with a leather folder and a badge. Deborah is standing just behind him, looking pale for the first time I can remember. The officer says, "Mrs. Krantz, we need to see proof of legal residence, your HOA board appointment, and a valid lease for 1207 Red Pine." Deborah starts sputtering. "I'm acting on behalf of the board. I have delegated authority. I've managed compliance for years," but the officer just shakes his head. "Not from a Maple Glen address, you haven't. Not with these records." I didn't have to say a word. My complaints, my evidence, they were all doing the talking now. Turns out Deborah hadn't lived in Maple Glen for over 6 years. The address she used belonged to a random tenant renting through Horizon Realty. She hadn't voted in a single HOA election, hadn't renewed her board status, hadn't reported her move, nothing. Every notice, every fine, every ounce of power she held, completely bogus. Her entire reign was built on fear, and as soon as someone called her bluff, the whole thing fell apart. Next morning, there's a fresh notice on the community bulletin: Deborah Krantz removed from HOA position effective immediately. All prior enforcement actions under review. Translation: the tyrant's out, the board's in shambles, and city officials are stepping in. The neighborhood's mailboxes got unsealed that same day. We even got a canned apology letter, said something about regret for undue stress and revisiting enforcement protocols. Jake read it out loud at the kitchen table and laughed. Translation: we messed with the wrong mom. Now Harper's birth certificate hangs above the window in her nursery, not taped to a front door, not filed with some cranky board, just framed and beautiful. A quiet reminder of the chaos she started without ever making a sound. Sometimes I stare at it and think about how the smallest person in Maple Glen toppled the loudest bully, how justice, when it finally comes, can be soft as a baby's sigh. Funny thing though, once the news broke, people started talking. Some neighbors said Deborah deserved what she got. Others grumbled about the board collapsing, worried about what comes next. Order versus freedom, rules versus fairness. Take your pick. I'll say this though, sometimes it takes just one person at the right time with the right amount of backbone or sleep deprivation to remind everybody that power only lasts as long as folks are too tired or too scared to speak up. So what do you think? Was I right to take her down, or did I just trade one kind of chaos for another? I want to hear what you'd have done. Drop your thoughts below. Was this justice overkill or just another day in HOA paradise?